morning, everyone, to a very special occasion. It's been a minute since we've been back with you, but nice to be back here doing a little bit of some podcasting for our end of the year awards, the Wooies,
the second annual
Wooie Awards show. It's kind of come up with this concept, last year as the podcast was starting to kind of pick up a little bit, and what is a podcast without a little bit of and we're gonna have drunk Uncle Nick before the end of the show. You can't complete a podcast without covering year-end awards for the 2020 season. And that's what we're doing tonight with this show here, guys. We're going to kind of reminisce and go through, talk some stats, bring up a lot of these players. Who was the guys that impressed us the most throughout the season? But what we always do at the end of every single fantasy football season, we all do it as fantasy managers out there. We take stock, what we learned this past season. And that's what I want to kind of bring up to you first before we kind of get into the awards aspects and things like this. But out of all of these that we competed in over the year, what was kind of your biggest takeaways from the 2020 campaign? What's something we learned as this season progressed, and something that you're gonna carry forward into 2021 as we start preparations for that draft?
Yeah, a couple of different things. I think for me, I drafted a little bit this way, but I think going forward, I think the evolution of the running quarterback who can pass. So your Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, who I'm sure we'll be touching on just a little bit. Deshaun Watson, some of these guys who, Russell Wilson, some of these guys who, have had great passing seasons, but also gets it done a little bit on the ground too, enough to make up for, what could be a touchdown or more, a game in the running game. So I think that's a big one. And then two, the evolution of the rookies and knowing who to pick in the right situations, who's going to hit, who's not going to hit, and just knowing those situations. I think those would be two of the biggest things that I'm carrying with me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a lot of information to kind of take back and really look and see how things unfolded throughout the season. It's something that we talked about on a weekly basis with this show in general, especially the Sunday morning shows. It seemed to kind of progress week in, week out throughout the season. And it's something we always do in the summertime, especially post NFL draft. We have this big spirited debate about rookies coming into the NFL and what we're expecting about these rookies. And everyone jumps on the rookie train in drafts. Everyone shoots that ADP up through the roof as the drafts begin, in earnest in August. What we learned with that this year, especially with the COVID season, is a lot of those rookies were held back. They were held in check. So that's something that we kind of have to look at and weigh as we progress into 2021.
Yeah.
NFL drafts are right around the corner. Those rookies started off very, very slow this year. They just did not have the practice. They did not have the reps to be able to get out there and get warmed up to game action. And so we saw that really kind of affect players, like Cam Akers. We saw it affect Jonathan Taylor in the early portions of the season. I mean, a lot of people were getting ready to jump ship on Jonathan Taylor weeks into the season.
And a lot of people did. Cam Akers was out there on the wire. I picked him up in a couple leags out there. I mean, first round pick, CEH was out there going in the first round. You go back and, I think one of the things that I personally pride myself on is not jumping on the rookie train too quick. You look at somebody who I know we're going to get into, Justin Jefferson, who was going in later rounds, Brandon Ayuk, who's going in later rounds. Those were the guys who brought you the value, not the guys who, were your Jonathan Taylors and Cam Akers and CEHs of the world who are going way too early. And I know you overdrafted. We told you not to. But, it's the guys who were going later who wound up making the difference this year.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then, of course, a lot of the big story for most of the 2020 season was injuries. The injury bug was a major, major hiccup for a lot of owners this season, as it is every year. And I think if you look at the total number by season's end compared to 2019, I think you kind of had a lot of the same number of injuries across the league if you go to compare the numbers, between each year. But I think the biggest thing we noticed this year as opposed to previous years is the big name players that were injured. Big names across the board. Now you go back to look at the ADP across the first round in drafts. There were not many of those guys that panned out and produced round one numbers on the comeback. And I mean, it's something we talked about off air before we came on. We talked about it. Middle of the first round was the sweet spot going into drafts for us. Yeah, as we got ready for the drafts in August, we wanted that 5, 6, 7, 8th spot somewhere around in there. And those were the guys that panned out for you. I mean, your Alvin Kamara's, your Derrick Henry's, your Dalvin Cooks. Those were the players being drafted around that specific point in the draft. Everybody else that bookended them on the front end and the back end, you had a lot of up and down play. You have injuries with Barkley, McCaffrey, Zeke up and down throughout the season. Mixon, Chubb missing time. It was mind numbing for fantasy managers out there.
Michael Thomas.
Yeah, Michael Thomas. A lot of injury, a lot of poor play, and I hate to question it. Maybe work ethic, wanting to be on the field. I think that was something we saw a little bit this year. That I kind of questioned going into drafts in 2021 is how much of a drive does Michael Thomas have to be that great one wide receiver number one in the league?
Who's going to be his quarterback? Yeah, that's my question. If it's Taysom Hill, and granted, Taysom Hill gave him probably his best regular season fantasy effort of the entire year.
Those last couple of games together before Drew Brees came back, I think they started kind of getting a little bit of a connection back. So
Alvin Kamara doesn't like him, but Michael Thomas sure does.
Alvin Kamara and most of the managers that had Alvin Kamara were calling for Taysom Hill's head during that stretch of the season. That's for sure. So, yeah. I mean, I had Kamara in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I limped into a no playoff situation with that team. But so then we rebound, we come back, set the table again, and get ready for the 21 season. Any other little tidbits? I don't want to get into too much with this podcast as it's the award show and things like that. But I think we'll. The next time that we come out on the podcast, I really probably we're gonna start jumping in, really looking forward to 2021, like free agents and things like that. But what's maybe a couple of things that's kind of piqued your interest as we've already kind of gotten into the offseason. Coaches fired, jobs open, rumors abound, like Deshaun Watson for one, that situation with the Texans. The situation with Tua, I know we had there was some information that came out today that the Dolphins were questioning Tua's talent level. That's interesting for a team that just drafted him in the first round
ahead of just
a year ago, ahead of Justin Herbert. So these are things that, I mean, it's already hot stove, like we have with the baseball. We've already got hot stove football. So what's some things piquing your interest already?
I just want to know where some of these free agents land. I mean, some of the coaching change is going to be huge, but look at some of the free agent names you're going to have out there this year. You got Alvin Kamara, Dak Prescott. You've got a lot of free agent names out there who, depending on where some of these guys go, that could shift the fantasy landscape altogether. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. And then, not to mention, you got the draft going on too. I will say, at least from a skill position standpoint, you've got a couple good wide receivers. You got a couple good running backs, but I don't really know if the rookie class this year is going to even touch anywhere close to what we've seen the last couple of years. Granted, we got a little time still to review, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of the round one, round two talent that we saw in the draft this year. I don't think you're going to see a lot of that. Granted, you're going to have your Jamar Chase and the Alabama receivers come out. And those are going to be some of the names that we're going to, I'm sure, be talking about. We're probably going to have at least 3 or 4 first round quarterbacks here. Running back, I don't think we're going to have that round one guy this year. Najee Harris could be a round one guy, but I think that's borderline at best with some of the free agents that are out there. So that's what I'm going to be intrigued.
Yeah, I think the running back situation going into 2021 is going to be something that's really going to be one to watch over the course of the next few months, because you have a lot, like you mentioned, there's going to a lot of free agents that are going to be on the table. You've got Alvin Kamara is going to be there. He's going to be looking for a new deal. You've got Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is going to be a big one, I believe, because odds are Green Bay is not going to pay him top dollar to keep him there. They've got AJ Dillon. What are they going to do with Jamal Williams as well? There's some names that are going to be out there, but the rookie class that's coming in, you mentioned Najee Harris, and I think there's a chance. I'll start kind of diving in a lot of the rookie stuff over the course of the next few weeks, and I've got my dynasty rankings finally inputted and updated post 2020 season. Oh no, you cannot. No, cannot hear me. Uh-oh. I think we got a little bit of a audio issue there. I can hear you just fine.
The beauty of live podcasting.
Yeah, the beauty of live podcasting. I can hear you just fine, but you cannot hear me. Might need to try something. Yeah, something went out on your computer.
Yeah,
as we try to communicate here.
Hey, there we go.
Got it?
Got it.
There we go. That's what I thought something might have popped out on your end there.
Negative.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Hey, and we're rolling. So, like I was mentioning, the free agent class with the running backs, the rookies are going to be one to watch as well. Like we mentioned, Najee Harris, that was the last point I made before you kind of fell out there. Najee Harris, I think, has a chance. He's going to be a first-round potential running back. I think he's going to be one to watch for as far as a landing spot with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw how that running game just completely fell off the table here at the end of the 2020 campaign. I think the Steelers are going to be looking at a player like Najee Harris at the end of the first round. But I do beg to differ as far as the depth of potential for the running back class that's coming out this year. There's plenty to go after, and like I said, I'll go after and start diving into these numbers and looking at a lot of the tape and stuff over the course of the next few weeks as I get ready to cover the draft. Got the Senior Bowl coming up here in a couple of weeks as well. So we're already going to be kind of diving into rookie evaluation mode for 2021 drafts. So it's crazy how things quickly turn around in the fantasy football landscape. It's a year-round thing nowadays. So definitely one to watch for. But yeah, off the top of my head, there's 5 or 6 rookie running backs that I'm going to be really, really interested in, even before the evaluations start for that position. So I'm excited. You might not be ready just yet, but I am.
We'll see what the free agent, where they move to. I think it could be, a lot like some of the landing spots for this year, to where, you're not going to have a slam dunk landing spot where somebody's going to land outside of maybe the Steelers situation. That's even if they don't bring in a free agent. You're going to have a lot of situations like you had this year with Cam Akers and Jonathan Taylor. Who knows what Jonathan Taylor would have done, if we didn't have some of the injuries that we had there to like Marlon Mack. If Marlon Mack would have got hurt, I bet you anything Jonathan Taylor wouldn't have had the year he has. But now that he's had that year, whole different story. So
yeah, Max out the door. I think we're gonna see that. That's gonna be a big swing to Jonathan Taylor, especially in dynasty formats. If you've got Jonathan Taylor as a dynasty manager right now, you're looking at a guy that's top 3 at the position, possibly, as far as dynasty rankings go. So definitely one to look forward to. But like you mentioned, landing spots, free agent landing spots are going to affect the rookie landing spots. And that we always talk about how much the running back system in fantasy football is just, it's very thin as far as guys that can contribute on a week in, week out basis because of the RBBCs that are out there and coaches kind of utilizing more than one back in their system. I think Next year is going to be even more wild, I think, at this point. You've got more rookie running backs coming in. You got a lot more people kind of filtering in and out as far as free agents go. I think we're kind of really looking at more of that influx as far as quarterback wide receiver connections next year, and kind of an influx. And you're starting to even see that at the quarterback position too. That was something I was thinking about the other day. Is you're starting to see a little bit of the old guard move out of the league, with the newer crop, the younger quarterbacks starting to phase into the league. Phillip Rivers is obviously on the way out. Drew Brees is on the way out potentially. Ben Roethlisberger, we don't know his situation just yet. He previously mentioned he's coming back, but then
Marquise
after
Pouncey
the game
just
the other
retired.
day, yeah, there's a lot. And then Anthony Costanzo for the Colts, he upped and retired yesterday as well. I mean, he's had a 10-year career, was horrid as a run blocker last year if you go and look at the grading on the offensive lineman. So maybe they bring in another guy to fill that spot, and that's an upgrade over Costanzo and can maybe even make Jonathan Taylor that much Matt that much better in 2021. So
Costanzo can't stand ya.
Seinfeld reference one already. So without further ado, kind of just wanted to pick the brains of everybody, kind of like lead in and really kind of just dive back into the season, how it ended and things like that too. Yes, without a doubt, we're jumping into the Wooies. We've got a handful of categories that we're going to give.
The Wooies.
Yeah, not the buoys, the Wooies. There's plenty of the boo from the 2020 season with COVID and all that going on.
Some of your teams.
I had a lot of buoy teams. I'm not going to deny that. There was some scrambling going on my end for most of the season, that's for sure. But handful of categories to give away here. Just going back and looking, we'll start everything off with kind of transitioning from the rookie talk we just had, transitioning into 2020 Rookie of the Year. We have, this is between three different guys. We've got Justin Jefferson, Justin Herbert, and Jonathan Taylor there are three potential award recipients here. Justin Jefferson, if you go over his numbers from the 2020 season, 125 targets, 88 catches, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. Most ever by a rookie. Did pass Anquan Bolden in that for a total of 273.2 fantasy points. And if you want to go back, and that's something we want to bookend as well with these categories and these players, his ADP in the preseason, wide receiver 50 at the position, finishes the year as the wide receiver 6 in PPR formats. So a major jump up for Justin Jefferson by season's end in that Minnesota Vikings offense. Herbert finishes the year with 334.84 fantasy points, 43-36 passing through the air for 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Another big jump here as well with the Tyrod Taylor situation entering the season. Herbert's ADP was QB 36, finishes as QB 9 on the season. And then Jonathan Taylor, the lovely Jonathan Taylor, 251.8 fantasy points, 1169 rushing on the ground with 11 touchdowns, 39 targets through the air, 36 receptions. ADP was RB19 to begin the drafting process, or by the end of the drafting process. Finishes RB6 in PPR formats. And the winner of your 2020 Rookie of the Year Wooie Award is Justin Jefferson. Wins the category with that amazing season that he put together. Like you mentioned, passing Anquan Bolden yardage-wise, most ever by rookie. I think this was a very tight category if you really kind of want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it. But how do you weigh the competition between these guys?
I was on Justin Jefferson from the beginning. The big reason I was on him is you had a guy that, he was replacing Stephon Diggs, and a guy that had over 1,000-yard production coming from the year before. You had Adam Thielen coming off a down year, although I like Thielen and I like Jefferson. But I think his consistency the whole year for me is what won him the Wooie Rookie of the Year. I think Justin Herbert, if you had him as a backup and needed him to play, he was good, but he may or may not have been starting week in, week out for your teams. And, Jonathan Taylor really didn't do much if you look at it, probably for the first 10 weeks of the year. He maybe had a week or two. But I'll say this. If you had to vote on a Rookie of the Year just for playoff time, Jonathan Taylor would be it. Jonathan Taylor came up so clutch down the stretch in action. I would say he is the Wooie rookie playoff winner. But the whole year, it's got to go to Justin Jefferson. Great year, very consistent week to week in PPR formats.
Yeah, and absolute
Cheers.
monster.
Thank you
as far
for
as
Justin Jefferson. Thank you.
The monster as far as consistency goes throughout the season. Justin Jefferson was, and that was the biggest question we had going into the year. We saw Minnesota become so run heavy in 2019, and it affected players' numbers like Adam Thielen. To where they were down for most of the year. Stephon Diggs' numbers were down a lot of 2019 too. I mean, if you go back and look at it, he was available on waiver wires at some point during the 2019 season. Stephon Diggs was, because there was no production coming from that passing game. So, but it's kind of a tale of certain aspects of the season with these three guys. Justin Jefferson had the great consistent season year round across the board. Herbert had that kind of chunk in the middle of the year once he was named the starter and took over. Had a great year kind of in that middle portion of the year and really kind of propelled a lot of managers to wins to put them in playoff contention. But then, like you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor had that just amazing stretch run during the fantasy playoffs. So everyone that held on to him and held the faith throughout the year was really paid off well at the end of the year with Jonathan Taylor's finish to the season. So we'll move on to the next category. Here is going to be 2020 Comeback Player of the Year. The potential award winners in this category, we have Corey Davis, Adam Thielen, and Ben Roethlisberger. Corey Davis finishes the season 190.4 fantasy points, 92 targets, 65 receptions for 84 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Preseason ADP on Corey Davis was wide receiver 76. Finishes the year at wide receiver 30 in PPR formats. Adam Thielen finishes the year off 254 fantasy points, 108 targets, 74 receptions for 25 yards, and an astonishing 14 touchdowns on the year. Was the wide receiver 12, so the last wide receiver 1 drafted in ADP preseason. Finishes the year at wide receiver 10, so a slight improvement there. And then Ben Roethlisberger, 272.2 fantasy points, 38.03 through the air, 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, was the ADP QB 14, finishes at QB 13. And the winner of the 2020 Wooie Comeback Player of the Year, Adam Thielen of your Minnesota Vikings, taking it down. Back-to-back wins for the Minnesota Vikings offense. So how does this category, how do things shake out for you here? I know you preseason was a very, very big proponent of Adam Thielen, was the GOAT here. I was a little more down on him coming into the season, but how do you shake out the category?
No, that's who I voted for. Thielen was that guy that, again, we all know about the passing offense and what it was in 2019. I mean, I thought, Thielen's one of those guys, especially too. I mean, Cousins was hurt in 2019 a little bit. So I saw a big opportunity for somebody like Adam Thielen, who is not getting drafted as a wide receiver 1, or is very close to not getting drafted as a wide receiver 1, who had that touchdown potential, gets looked at. Not to mention, I thought it was something too. You had Diggs coming off, injury from the year before, and especially Justin Jefferson taking some of the double teams off. That was enough for me. Granted, I was not very big on Corey Davis, even though, he was in a contract year. I was big on Big Ben. I had him in quite a few leagues, but again, I think somebody that. At the wide receiver position, do what Adam Thielen did, 14 touchdowns. I mean, that's huge. Yeah. You can find quarterback production. You can't find wide receiver production like that just anywhere. So kudos. Good
Adam
call
Thielen
from your boy, the GOAT.
Adam Thielen was a guy too that, I mean, he paid off well in standard standard classic scoring formats, which was something, I didn't really see coming at all because of the touchdown production.
He
That
just
was
gets
something.
looked at down there. I mean, he just does. I mean, Justin Jefferson is looked at more on the deep side, but Thielen gets those looks at the goal line from Kirk Cousins. So as long as he's the quarterback, Thielen's who he's going after.
Yep, I agree. I thought it was based on the verbiage of comeback player of the year. I mean, you can look at it different ways, but I mean, Corey Davis, sure, if you look at Corey Davis, he was a guy that was left for dead among fantasy managers coming into this season as purposed of his wide receiver 76 ADP. Yeah, nobody wanted to touch him based on production that he's had given the last few years, but he comes in he finishes with his career high in yardage, career high in touchdowns. Yeah, it's only 5, but he only had a high of 4 just 2 years ago. So that's something, he, like I said, left for dead, comes back, has a very solid fantasy season. I mean, there were some ups and downs there. I mean, there was a stretch where he was ranking as a wide receiver 2 for a very solid stretch of the season. And kind of similar to Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen had weeks where if he was not producing as far as 1 to 2 touchdowns a week, we saw those. He was having some down weeks here and there, but as a totality of the entire season, yes, I think Adam Thielen beyond capable of winning that comeback player of the year for 2020, and the Wooie solidly goes to Adam Thielen there. Now we'll go to more disappointing category. We're going to move on to the 2020 bust of the year.
Let's just call it the Bowie.
Yeah, this one you could refer to. Yeah,
we just rename that. This is the bust of the year, the Bowie.
The 2020 Bowie of the year, aka bust of the year.
Not like a dinghy, not like a buoy you'd find in the water, but
no, not at all. Like, I can't believe this guy stayed on my fantasy roster, and I can't believe I drafted him so high. That kind of a thing. But our guys that are in this category here, we've got Ezekiel Elliott, finishes 217.7 fantasy points, 979 yards on the ground for 6 touchdowns. Did see 71 targets, 52 receptions, and 338 yards through there with another 2 touchdowns on the year. Was obviously drafted as RB3 preseason ADP. Finishes as RB9, so he still maintains that RB1 finish. A lot of us did not think that was going to be the case at midpoint of the year with how he was performing post Dak Prescott injury. And then we got Carson Wentz next on this list, 203.4 fantasy points, 26-20 through the air, 16 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, was drafted at QB 11, finishes QB 22 on the season. And then finally we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 176 fantasy points, 803 on the ground, 4 touchdowns, 54 targets, 36 receptions, 297 yards for another touchdown. This was the big boom of the preseason heading into the season. He was drafted at RB7, solid in the first round of drafts, finishes RB22 on the year, and unceremoniously, the winner of this 2020 Bowie of the year will be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It was very it was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
It's definitely the worst of times
for Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners in 2020. They were soaking up all the sunshine after week 1, just loving life with how he came out of the gates with that amazing performance in week 1. What did he do to follow that up? Not much. We saw that Kansas City Chiefs offense really went back to that really heavy passing attack, kind of really shied away from the run. And then later on in the year, they acquire Le'Veon Bell, and it becomes an even more muddied and murky situation in that backfield, and it just absolutely murdered CEH's fantasy production. So between those 3, how are you feeling about that category, weighing your options there?
Oh, I think this is the absolute winner for me. You and I talked about it, how much I was not on Clyde Edwards-Helaire being a first round pick.
Yep.
When his ADP was even in round 3, I didn't like it. This was at the time that Damian Williams was still in tow
Before the
here,
COVID opt-out. Yep.
and I thought for sure that they were going to be splitting time. Damian Williams is the guy. Look what he did last year. So I was not about to draft him. So this was definitely the guy for me. Really close, though, was Carson Wentz. I like Carson Wentz this year. I thought he was going to be a good offense. I think the bad thing for Carson Wentz is his options. His receiving options were horrendous. They were hurt most of the year. Not to mention, one thing you and I really touched on this year with Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz was a very close second, but I think just with the round 1 ADP, that's why, for me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has to be the guy. But I think the most disappointing fantasy performance has got to be Carson Wentz. Drafted as a quarterback 1, finishes as bad as he did. But see, the difference with these guys, Clyde Edwards-Helaire did it to himself. Wentz had it done to him. Bad offensive line, bad everything on offense. Edwards-Helaire just sucked.
Well, you can say the same thing with Ezekiel Elliott, too. It was done to him. Dak Prescott goes down completely.
But he still finished as a running back 1.
Still finishes as a running back 1.
I don't like
should have been a top 5 running back by season's end, I believe. I mean, obviously, I'm a Cowboys fan speaking from the heart here, but I mean, you just look at the numbers. He was immediately disappointing as soon as Dak Prescott went down. That offensive line was in shambles within the first month of the season. We had by week 12, we were starting guys that were practice squad players heading into the season. We were down to our 3rd string offensive lineman in a couple of spots on that offensive line. Obviously, it affects how Ezekiel Elliott played throughout the season. But the biggest thing, if you look at it from an objective standpoint from the outside in, just look at how Ezekiel Elliott was producing and how he played and how he looked on the field compared to Tony Pollard at some point during the late in the season. Tony Pollard looked like the better running back, more burst, but it seemed like Ezekiel Elliott just kind of lost a little bit of drive throughout the year, and it really disappointed some of the fantasy managers that were really counting on him throughout the year. And he was a letdown mostly week after week after week, not getting into the end zone. Didn't have a 100-yard rushing game until I believe week 14 of the season. It was utter disappointment.
And let's throw it out for the Bowie too. We didn't include guys who were injured at most of the year, so we're not including like your Barkleys and CMCs and Michael Thomas. We're talking about the guys who were out there and stunk. So just an FYI,
guys that when you hit the submit button on your starting lineup, you're going, I gotta keep playing the guy. Right. He's healthy. He's out there. I mean, that was me in one league where I had Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, there's really no other options back behind him. I had, at the end of the year in this particular league, I had Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers as my RB2 and RB3. In those last few weeks of the season, obviously Ezekiel Elliott's on my bench because I can't count on the guy.
We told you week in, week out. It might be time to bench Zeke, and depending on the week, it was.
Yeah, depending on who you had there. So, yeah. But no, overall, I agree. I do believe, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the biggest Bowie bust of the year here between these players. I'll give you Wentz. There was a lot of expectation there, but the wide receiver core was just absolute suspect after the injuries. They didn't have Alshon Jeffrey literally all year. Deshaun Jackson came back twice and got injured twice.
Rager was out half the year.
Then you had Jalen
out half the year.
Rager was out a lot of the year. Ertz was out a lot, but even before the injury, Ertz looked like a completely different tight end than what we've been accustomed to seeing over the course of the last few years. So I think something was missing there.
If he wasn't injured, he would definitely be on the Bowie list and probably getting my number 1 vote. He was probably the one guy I was on the most, who stunk the most, even when he did.
It was bad.
So
it was bad. So I will give you that. So we'll move on to the 2020 Sleeper of the Year category. We do have Justin Jefferson in this category based on, of course, ADP and where he finishes on the year. But joining him in this category is James Robinson and Logan Thomas. Robinson finishes at 247.4 fantasy points, 1,070 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns, 60 targets, 49 receptions, 344 yards through the air with another 3 touchdowns. So a double-digit touchdown total for James Robinson on the year. ADP prior to the season was RB58 and finishes inside the top 10 at RB7 on the year. Logan Thomas, 176.62 fantasy points, finishes at 110 targets, 72 receptions, 670 through the air and yardage, 6 touchdowns, was drafted as the tight end 35 in preseason, finishes at tight end 3 on the year production-wise. And the Wooie for your 2020 sleeper of the year is going to go to James Robinson. Takes down this category. Amazing performance from James Robinson throughout most of the 2020 campaign. I don't think there was any argument that could have been made here. You could make a slight argument for Justin Jefferson based on the season, but I think expectations is really where this sways the vote for me here. It's going into week 1, there was 0 expectations for James Robinson running behind that offensive line for the Jacksonville Jaguars with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Justin Jefferson at least had a veteran quarterback, a great running game. We felt like he was going to have some decent production throughout the fantasy season. We obviously didn't know where he was going to finish. So for me, that sways the vote. James Robinson is the easy winner here for me because he essentially came out of nowhere to finish as RB7 on the season.
Yeah, I would. The reason I would give it to Robinson, my affinity for Justin Jefferson there, I think is just the position. There were so many running backs who didn't finish this year, who didn't even have an end of the year. So I think Justin Jefferson was at a position who you could find somebody week in, week out, which you couldn't do that at the running back position. So that's why it is absolutely James Robinson for me. And that is honestly what goes to show with Logan Thomas being there. Who would have thought Logan Thomas? I mean, that's not a lot of points for a tight end either. To finish as tight end 3, this was a historically bad season.
It was a very bad season.
But enough about the tight end position. Congrats, James Robinson.
Congrats to James Robinson pulling down the 2020.
You more than you will know.
Oh my gosh!
Whoa!
Pulling down the scotch, having a great time,
gentleman Jack, man.
Oh, okay.
By the way, I know you know what's coming up Friday here, but I've got 2 days till I'm 40 years old. So,
the 2021 Bowie for oldest podcast host Nick Heffley turning 40 in just a couple of days. Oh man! And the variance. If we want to get into the analytics of this, the variances here. 39 years old, has his first kid. Man, that's a stretch, man.
I've gotten married and had my first kid within the last year and a half, man.
There's a lot of legs on the. There's some tread on those tires.
Let me tell you, man. Let me tell you. Putting my daughter to sleep at night. I just pick her up and I feel like Albert Pujols having my oblique kind of hurt. It hurts some nights just to even pick her up, and I don't even do anything throughout the day other than sit at a computer desk and work. So it's bad. It's bad.
Oh yeah, that's why you got to do your parenting at an early age.
I tried, man. I couldn't find the right woman, so it took me long.
I had some seasoning on me. I did.
Your beard looks like you have a lot of seasoning.
Well, this is also too.
Salt with that
but also too, that's the disadvantage of having kids at an early age is because they drive you to gray. You've got a 13-year-old daughter, and this is what happens. 13-year-old daughter.
I'm exactly a year and a month older than you, and I have a perfectly manicured, a little bit of gray, but not as much.
I was going to say, I think in total, my beard looks better just as far as how thick and full it looks. But
I mean, it could be thick and full,
I
but
digress.
I remain having a youthful beard.
As
Youthful
well,
is the key word. Youthful.
yeah, at least I didn't pull an oblique picking my child up. But we're
I didn't
neither
pull
here
an
nor there.
oblique. I just said the oblique hurt.
The man's on the DL. It's a pitcher going down on the DL with an oblique injury from
IL.
rocking the baby to sleep.
IL, Brandon.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to change that to IL last year. What are we going to have a DH in baseball this year? It's January and we still don't know that.
Who knows?
I mean,
no idea.
Like I've kind of lost a little bit of my love over the course of the last few years for fantasy baseball, but I mean, good Lord, it's January and you don't even your drafts are going to be going on what in February,
it's a
March?
major rule thing. It's a major rule that you need to have in place. I think that should be decided on soon, so teams in the National League can know whether they need to get additional hitters or not. So
exactly, it's a big pivot, and you don't know what to do, especially if you're fantasy baseball managers out there. You don't know what to do in your drafts. That's the thing. That's a big draft strategy hiccup currently for a lot of people, I believe. So back to the business at hand, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get on the tangent there, we're going to move on. I would say segue because we last talked about Logan Thomas. Segue to the 2020 tight end of the year. We have Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, Robert Tonyan in this category here. Kelce with 311.76 fantasy points, 145 targets, 105 receptions, 14-16 yardage through the air, with 11 touchdowns on the season. Was preseason tight end 1, finished as tight end 1, so consistency there. Darren Waller, 276.6 fantasy points, 146 targets, bettering Travis Kelce. 107 in receptions, bettering Travis Kelce. 1196 through the air, 9 touchdowns. Was drafted as tight end 5, finished as tight end 2 on the year. And then finally, Robert Tonyan, 176.6 fantasy points, 59 targets, 52 receptions, 586 yards through the air, but 11 touchdowns on the season. Was not in the ADP data at the tight end position.
Matthew Berry had him there.
Finished at tight end 4 on the season. That shows you this, like we talked about just a second ago, Logan Thomas. The yardage, receptions were not there. The touchdowns were, and the tight end depth was god-awful. That's how Robert Tonyan was your tight end 4 in PPR formats in 2020. So I think it goes without saying, but we're going to go with the pomp and circumstance anyways. The 2020 Wooie goes to, for tight end of the year, Travis Kelce, obviously. Obviously, that he's been the tight end 1 in fantasy for 5 straight years now. There's really not we have the George Kittles of the world that a lot of people were very high on and drafted ahead of Kelce.
Had a good year, but he was hurt.
Yep. Injuries played a major part in George Kittle as well. So Darren Waller, that's another one of your favorites. Going back at least, of course, the last couple. I was big on Waller coming into the season in 2019. I was pushing him up a little bit. I had a good feeling with him coming into the 2019 season. I was wavering on my thoughts on him where he was going ADP wise coming into the season, but you were still standing firm with Waller. How do you stack up the 3 that we have in this category?
Yeah, no, I think Waller based on ADP had the best finish. If you drafted Waller, you didn't spend a round 1 or round 2 pick on a tight end, and you probably finished with a better team. Kelce was the most consistent. I think he has to win the Wooie at the tight end position, but I think what screwed some of my teams up this year was I had a big affinity for Zach Ertz. I don't know. There's no reason to think why Zach Ertz would not have had a good year this year. So I drafted Ertz over Waller. I liked Waller. I had Waller in some leagues, and I won some leagues with Waller. But Travis Kelce was consistently the man. But the big reason I like Darren Waller was just the other options. I mean, who was going to see Nelson Aguilar coming out of nowhere to have the kind of year that he did? But I think Waller was the one consistent option for Carr this year. And Tanyan, talk about coming out of nowhere, literally came. I mean, Matthew Berry's the only guy that I ever heard of talk about Robert Tanyan. Everybody was on Jay Sternberger this year.
Yep.
Tanyan had the one big game on Monday night. Went for 3 or 4 weeks, did nothing. I picked him up in a couple leagues. He had a good finish. He scored a touchdown. What was it, 6 weeks in a row? There toward the end of the year, so he had a good finish. Didn't necessarily have yardage games where he was getting that touchdown to where, again, as bad historically as the tight end position was this year, he finished with 50 plus receptions, 500 plus yards. The touchdowns is really what got it done. But I think at the end of the day, Kelce, lived up to his draft potential. Waller was
Kelce.
Better,
if you really look
value,
at it, Kelce put together round one value in production. So I mean, that's the guy paid. He was drafted. I think overall ADP he was getting drafted towards the end of round 2. He provides you with late round 1 numbers. I mean, that's a great finish for Travis Kelce. I mean, I think he had career highs with both the yardage and touchdown scored this year, and that's after 5 straight years finishing tight end 1 in fantasy. Honorable mention that I do want to throw out though, TJ Hawkinson had a great season. I mean, up until the last few weeks of the year with the hiccups going on with the Detroit Lions and the
Stafford
kind of just winning the shambles, had a great consistent season. I had him as my backup tight end in numerous leagues, who turned into being my starter week in and week out. So, I mean, kudos to TJ Hawkinson putting things together in a year. I mean, obviously you have to factor in Kenny Golladay being out of that lineup for a majority of the season. Like you mentioned, Stafford up and down, playing injured. The guy was it felt like he was put together with bubble wrap and duct tape by the end of the year. But it is what it is. But I just wanted to mention Hawkinson. I want to throw him out too. He had another great season, so pointing him out too. We'll move on to the other pass catching category, wide receivers. This one we have Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. Adams finishes at 357.4 fantasy points on the year, 149 targets, 115 receptions, 1374 through the air, 18 touchdowns. Was drafted as wide receiver 2 ADP wise, finishes as wide receiver 1 on the season. Tyreek Hill finishes at 328.9 fantasy points, 135 targets, 87 receptions, 1276 through the air, 15 touchdowns. Drafted as wide receiver 3 preseason, finishes as wide receiver 2. Stephon Diggs, finally, 328.6, barely behind Tyreek Hill. 166 pacing the field in targets this year. 127 leads the league in receptions on the year. 1535 through the air with only 8 touchdowns. Was drafted as wide receiver 23, so right at the tail end of wide receiver 2 categories. And wide receiver 3 was his finish on the season. In the 2020 wide receiver of the year, Wooie will go to Davante Adams. Brings home the hardware. Sir, it is in the mail. We'll send it up to you in Green Bay after the season is over.
What is that? I wonder what is the Wooie going to look like?
I don't know.
It should be? It should be like a Ric Flair, like.
Yeah. Yeah, we might have to come up. We might have to talk to some designers about putting together an actual trophy, and seeing. I mean, because if you go like an NFL Network, they do that angry runs of the week thing on their show every single week. Was it like it's on Tuesday or Wednesdays, and they give away a scepter to the guy with the hardest run of the week, where he trucks a guy, knocks a guy over, stiffs arm a guy.
Derrick Henry wins it like half the year.
Derrick Henry did win it at least once, but no, they physically mail a scepter to the guy that wins the award. We're gonna have to come up with something like that, just for publicity's sake. Try to get one of these NFL players to actually hold a Wooie would be a dream come true for me. But yeah, Adams wins the category here. Obviously, the number 1 wide receiver on the season. I mean, good God Almighty, 18 touchdowns. But one thing I was looking at here, and it kind of caught me by surprise too, was the season end numbers for both Kelsey and Hill. They were both easily over 300 fantasy points for the Chiefs
Same
offense.
Team.
Now, my goodness.
Don't
stack up.
Same Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. I mean, that's not even the kind of offense that the Chiefs are. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't have two good options on the same team.
So stack up the position. Obviously Adams wins it. How close was it for you?
But no, I don't think. Look, I mean, Hill and Stephon Diggs both finished with really good seasons, but 18 touchdowns. I mean, the kind of year, when I look at a guy and how he finished, I look at the year-to-year, production throughout the year, but you also got to look at playoff time. And Adams was putting together multi-touchdown games during playoff time. So that's important. He easily wins the award for me.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll go ahead and point this out too, and it's something I always point out with Davante Adams. It's only his second ever career 1,000-yard reception season. He's always hovered in that 900-yard range by season's end. It's been weird to see that for a guy that's catching passes from Aaron Rodgers, but here we are. I mean, great season. Finishes wide receiver 1, so it's easily a dead giveaway there. So no bones about it. Davante Adams, top wide receiver for fantasy football in 2020. Going to the running backs. Next here, we've got Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook here in this category. Henry goes 330.1 fantasy points, 2,027 yards on the ground, 17 rushing touchdowns. Adds in another 31 targets, 19 receptions for 114 yards. Was drafted RB5 preseason, finishes as RB3 in PPR formats. Keep in mind that, PPR formats. Alvin Kamara finishes at 376.8 fantasy points on the year, 932 on the ground with 16 touchdowns. Yes, that was the 6-touchdown game included. 107 targets, 83 receptions, a career high after 3 straight 81 reception seasons. 756 yards with another 5 touchdowns through the air. Drafted as RB6 preseason. Finishes as the RB1 in PPR formats for 2020. And then finally, Dalvin Cook, 332.8 fantasy points, 1,557 on the ground for 16 touchdowns, adds in 54 targets for 44 receptions, 361 yardage with another touchdown. RB4 preseason ADP, finishes as the RB2 on the season in PPR formats. And our 2020 Wooie running back of the year goes to Derrick Henry of my right down the road Tennessee Titans, stiff-arming the competition to bring home the trophy. 2,000-yard season.
Thank you, Derrick Henry.
You can't say much else about it. I mean, finishes the season off great. Finishes RB3, obviously in PPR formats. If the guy would ever
number one in standard formats.
Number one in standard formats, that is correct. So it's Derrick Henry there, but how close is this category for you looking at the guys?
It's very close. I had some form, we talked about it a little earlier. We wanted to draft in that mid-range, here in drafts. I had some form of one of these 3 running backs in damn near every league.
Yeah.
It's really close at the end of the day. But I think consistency, it was really close between these 3 guys. I think any one of these 3 guys could have deserved the Wooie. And let's face it, we all know that they want it because we wanted them. Yeah. But congrats to Derrick Henry. 2,000 yards. You had multiple 100-yard games and the bonuses for that. I think that was the biggest thing for me that comes out of this is, Kamara doesn't necessarily have those 100-yard games. Cook was there, but he had some injuries. Henry was there and consistent the whole year and scoring touchdowns. So Henry's the guy.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you see here is Henry finishes 17 touchdowns. Kamara 21 total, 5 through the air, 17 for Dalvin Cook. These guys were in the end zone week in and week out. They gave you production week in and week out, and we saw down the stretch Derrick Henry was putting together monster game after monster game after monster game, which he does every single season. It comes away with the Wooie here.
Yeah, I didn't like Derrick Henry a couple of years ago. He's one of those guys in PPR leagues I wanted to avoid, and you think about it.
2 years ago,
he has to have these big games.
Yeah,
and he does. If he finds the end zone and gets 100 yards, that's 16 points right off the bat. And that, granted, he doesn't get a lot of receptions, but he gets those 200-yard games and multiple touchdowns. So that's where his value comes in. So I always liked him in round 2, but round 1, there was that philosophy change. They
had
rid of Dion Lewis
splitting time with Derrick Henry 2 years ago. That was a Matt LaFleur special, and that's what I keep telling people. Matt LaFleur loves to split the backs, and then everybody that wants to. Aaron Jones is the man. Aaron Jones is the man. He might be the most talented back in that Green Bay backfield, but Matt LaFleur is going to split time between his running backs, no matter who he has back there. It's just who he is as a coach, and then we saw that with Derrick Henry. Matt LaFleur leaves. They change the philosophy of the offense and really get Derrick Henry more involved season long running the ball. They still have not found a way, for some reason, to get him the ball in open space out of the backfield and pass receptions. That's got to change. And if it does change, you're looking at the guy that's going to be the de facto number one running back year in and year out, I believe, if he has any kind of uptick in pass receptions, because he's getting the rushing yardage. He's getting into the end zone.
He's going to have to fall off at some point. I mean, he's got maybe a year or two left until he falls off a cliff. So
maybe. I don't know. That guy built like a brick shit house. So I don't think that.
I mean, man, some of the stiff arms he gets. He should win the Wooie just for the stiff arm that he gives out. Man,
yeah.
alive.
Yeah, you could probably set aside a Derrick Henry stiff arm of the year Wooie and find the one clip through the year that we like the most and give it to him for that.
But no, here's to you, Derrick Henry. Thank you. You won me a couple of championships this year. Thank you, Derrick. Thank you, Derrick Henry. Cheers to you.
Cheers to him. Now we move on to the glamour position of the NFL in fantasy football.
Center.
The center.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes. The quarterback position here is what we're going to next. We've got Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, and Kyler Murray represented here in this category. Josh Allen finishes the year at 397.06 fantasy points, 45-44 through the air for 37 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Adds in another 421 on the ground with another 8 touchdowns on the ground. Was drafted as the QB9 preseason ADP. Finishes as QB1 on the year. Aaron Rodgers finishes at 384.26 fantasy points, 42.99 through the air, 48 touchdowns passing. Leads the league with only 5 interceptions. That ratio is absurd there for Aaron Rodgers. 149 on the ground with another 3 touchdowns added in as well, putting him over 50 total for the year. Drafted as the QB12 preseason ADP. A lot of people were down on Aaron Rodgers based off of 2019 coming into the year. He was the very last QB1 drafted. Finishes as QB2 on the season. And then finally we have Kyler Murray, 381.74 fantasy points on the year, 39.71 through the air, 26 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, 811 on the ground, with another 11 touchdowns added into that total, finishing at 37 total. Drafted QB6 overall. QB3 was his finish on the year. And the 2020 Wooie quarterback of the year goes to
Josh Allen. The wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
And apparently they circled those wagons and continue to, as we are in playoff time right now. They're still on the board. Josh Allen, amazing year.
Didn't see it coming.
Yes.
Brandon and I were in our Hampton Cup draft that we held at Truist Park, the home of the Braves. I had Carson Wentz as my number 1 running back.
Wait a second. What park? Y'all change the name?
Truist Park. SunTrust is now called Truist. Bank. They merged with BB&T, who you would probably know neither of those.
Breaking news here on the Woo Fantasy Podcast.
It's only a year old, but okay, B.
I didn't know.
So I drafted Carson Wentz as my number one quarterback in an auction league, and somebody threw out Josh Allen for $1, and I bid too just to bid him up. And this is a standard league. You know, you better. And in this league, it is heavy. You need 250 passing yards to even get 1 point.
Yeah.
In the yardage, and I threw a second buck on Josh Allen, and got stuck with him. And I thought, shit, I don't want Josh Allen as my backup quarterback. Never thinking in a million years. You know, Josh Allen's one of these guys.
I already had 2 quarterbacks rostered at this time. Otherwise, I would have grabbed.
But he's one of these guys, though. He doesn't pass for a lot of yards. He might go 200 yards, 215, and 2 or 3 touchdowns. He's going to run.
That was the perception yards. Coming into the year. Yes,
it was the perception. I believed it. Honestly, I was prepared to play Carson Wentz the whole year, and he won me the league. So you know what, Josh Allen, boom, baby, boom.
Yeah, wow, Josh Allen.
You know, it was close. You know, Aaron Rodgers had a great 50 touchdowns. Monster year, but I think the rushing yards and the rushing touchdowns is what got Josh Allen over the hump here. So
I mean,
all three of these guys had really good years, but Kyler Murray had a bad end of the year with that injury that he sustained. Yep. Yeah. But kudos, if you had one of these 3 guys, you know, you were winning championships. So Josh Allen.
Yeah, Josh Allen, I mean, he was the guy that was obviously everybody's seen the graphics and the statistics on him. He was sub 60% completion percentage coming into the year. Nobody thought he could complete accurately down the field.
Amazing what Stephon Diggs did.
And Stephon Diggs comes into town and he shoots up to 68% completion percentage on the year. Monster year through the air and on the ground as well. I mean, kudos to Josh Allen, that Bills offense. They put together a great year. And it's odd to me that Stephon Diggs can be that big of a piece to change things around for them on the year. But yes, Josh Allen, our Wooie QB of the year.
Stephon Diggs is he's always been a top 10 receiver when he's been healthy. I mean, he's
arguably
underrated. Very underrated.
I won't say that because he is arguably one of the best route runners in the game today.
He is, but he's underrated. I mean, his time with the Vikings, he was underrated. He's an afterthought to Adam Thielen. He was the entire time. He went to Buffalo to be able to make his own name, and he did.
Look at the preseason ADP, wide receiver 23. So
we should not have been so down on him.
Of the 2 where you were thinking, okay, Josh Allen can't throw the ball accurately downfield. Stephon Diggs is great in downfield. There's going to be some type of distrust here between those 2. I don't know what they're doing, and they clicked and it hit and it worked, and
they did. That's how you know. And I had from 2019. I had John Brown, and I had him pegged as a breakout guy, and he did. Yeah. But a lot of that was over the middle. It wasn't down the field, and you know, Diggs coming in changed Allen, changed that whole offense, and you see what was a result of that. So kudos to that entire passing offense, because the running situation sure didn't do much of anything, even though I had Zach Moss and he had a decent year. So, but the passing offense in there was great.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then moving to the very final and most important category, the 2020 MVP Wooie of the year. We've got 4 guys in this category here. We've got the aforementioned Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers, but we also have Alvin Kamara and we have Devontae Adams. We've went over the statistics. You, the fans out there in Woo Nation, did vote on all these categories, and we appreciate that as well. And the winner of the 2020 Wooie MVP of the year is going to go to Devontae Adams, bringing home the hardware. 2-time winner for 2020 of Wooie Awards, Devontae Adams. Great season. We just talked about it. All these guys in this category, I mean, it for me, hard to choose the winner of these 4 names. They all were super, super important to fantasy manager titles in 2020.
I think the big reason that Devontae Adams wins is rarity of the category, and just his consistency throughout the latter half of the year and scoring not only touchdowns but multiple touchdowns every game. So you could have had another quarterback that could have, got close to matching, I should say, Rodgers and Allen. But you're not finding a wide receiver on a week-to-week basis that matches what Adams did. Now, granted, Alvin Kamara had that 6-touchdown game, but Adams was the model of consistency here, and that's who I'm going with.
Yeah, I agree. We're talking on a season where Devontae Smith wins the Heisman at wide receiver for the first time since 1991. Devontae?
No. 1991. Sorry.
1991. Yes. No.
But who was the last true wide receiver to win the Heisman? Get Desmond Howard, whatever. He was a hybrid guy.
Tim Brown.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, Tim Brown was the last one to win that award in
85? 87, I think.
Let's
look it up. It's
been a long,
you keep talking, I'll look it up.
Okay. So, Devontae Adams has the great year. Super important. 18 touchdowns is just something you don't see every single year. The MVP category for fantasy football purposes, and even throughout the NFL, is usually dominated by the running back and quarterback position. And then, like you mentioned, it was something where you could kind of go across the board with quarterbacks and have a different quarterback that could have produced well enough for you to win on a week in, week out basis. But if you have Devontae Adams as your wide receiver one, you were already at an advantage week in and week out because you knew you were getting a stat line that was going to be base above most of what other guys can produce on a great week. So obviously it's a great year for Devontae Adams.
Tim Brown, I'm correct.
87?
1987.
Yeah, I knew it was in those mid years. Yeah. Last great Notre Dame player.
Is that where we're Jeff Samardzija?
Oh, Anti-Teo. Yeah,
who's the Chicago Bear?
For not much longer, I'm sure he's probably going to be off the team.
He was playing in the playoff game. Well,
how are you feeling about that playoff game? As we're finishing
Smith podcast, we had a lot of guys hurt.
We're finishing
your boy Woo Miller got kicked out of the game.
Woo Miller punching guys. That's happened the last 2 games for the Bears against the Saints. We've had a wide receiver punch a Saints defensive back and get kicked out of the game. So I want you. We're putting a bow on the podcast. We're putting a bow on the 2020 season as a whole right now. So let's kind of do our exit interview, so to speak.
Okay.
Your Chicago Bears.
Okay.
Now out of the playoffs, they backed into the playoffs. We'll go ahead and we'll say that backed into the playoffs.
They did, unfortunately. Yes.
Should not have been there, but they're now out.
5-1.
They came out today. The front office said Ryan Pace is going to be retained for next year. Matt Nagy's going to be retained for next year. Mitchell Trubisky has to be out. So they did mention that today as well. They said fixing the quarterback position for 2021 is a must for them. So that to me says, Trubisky, you're gone. So what do you think right now, as of January 13th, 2021, the Bears should be doing as the season starts to unfold, off season? Where do we need to go, and what's the player you want under center for the Bears in 2021?
I mean, I want Deshaun Watson. I wanted Deshaun Watson from the beginning. I didn't want Mitch Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky is what I think you and I thought he would be. Not other people, but what you and I thought it would be. He had a couple of good weeks, FanDuel-wise, week to week, where he was worth the money that we paid for him.
He doubled the value he had, sure.
The biggest problem that I had with Mitch Trubisky all year is that Matt Nagy cannot call plays anymore. The trade that the Bears made for Nick Foles for a 4th-round pick and taking on all his money was horrendous. The team was horrible. They shouldn't have won the division, but they should have been a lot closer. 5-1 start, 3-0 under Mitch Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky, I don't know what Mitch Trubisky's record was to end the year, but it had to be like 6-1 7-1. I mean, the finish that he had to the year, they won 3 out of their last 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mitch Trubisky was not horrible to end the year. Mitch Trubisky was very serviceable. Is he the guy that's going to win the Bears the Super Bowl? No. Because of that, we're moving on.
Moving on, I think what you need to do, and we saw the Bears really kind of hunker down and find out their identity. That's David Montgomery.
It is.
That they finally figured out what they need to do from an offensive perspective, and that is get the ball into David Montgomery's hands. He's a volume producer, and we saw that down the stretch run. Yeah, it was against some of the worst defenses in the league as far as against run defenses, but David Montgomery is centerpiece of that offense, and they need to build around him, I believe, moving forward. If you get a competent quarterback under center for the Bears next year, I believe they could potentially contend in that division. I'll readily admit that.
Yeah, it depends on who's under center. If it's going to be Nick Foles, time to punt. But, I mean, the Bears have also got Allen Robinson as a free agent, too. I mean, if Allen Robinson leaves, we're screwed. I'm telling you, we're going to be – he should be gone unless we bring in a big-name quarterback.
I think Vegas right now, you know where Vegas has Allen Robinson's potential landing spot right now?
Green Bay would be smart.
Miami Dolphins. That's his.
Why would he want to go there?
I go back
with Tua.
Go back to Florida. No state tells.
I'd rather go back to Jacksonville, and you're going to have Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer there, and you're going to be the instant number one right alongside DJ Shark. That'll be the better spot. Go back home.
It would be. But yeah, Allen Robinson's gone. Trubisky's gone for the Bears.
Speaking of which, we need to do some dynasty stuff here.
Yeah.
Go after DJ Shark. Go after Brashad Perryman. Go after, to a lesser extent, go after Denzel Mims. And, the Jets, I don't know if they're going to get a quarterback, but boy, if they do, man alive, you're going to see Justin Fields and, any Jacksonville receiver right now, major boon up.
Yeah, as we kind of progress over the next few weeks, I've got some dynasty pieces that I'm going to produce for rotoballer.com. So be on the lookout for that. So go check that out. But we mentioned your team. We'll go ahead and mention mine before we head off.
Let's see. Brandon, what do you think that the Cowboys need to do?
There's no ifs, ands, or buts on that, but now we've backed ourselves into a corner that we have to pay arm and a leg price for Dak Prescott to be under center for 2021.
Should have signed him last year.
Could have signed him last year for the $38.5 million. He turned it down. We tried. We offered it. So now we're in a position. I think we're going to see some prices being haggled, but I think both sides are ready to commit to a marriage now. Unfortunately, I think we should have lost numerous games down the stretch to improve our draft position. We didn't. So now, instead of looking at some of the guys, we could have had a shot at Justin Fields at number 2, possibly. Yeah, Zach Wilson's there. Trey Lance is going to be there. I'm not interested in any of those guys. Trask, I think, is going to be a second rounder, is what I feel like right now.
He already draft position this last game.
And Mac Jones is going to be kind of. I think he's the guy you're going to watch for around New England's draft spot if they don't go.
I keep seeing him to New England. We need to do a Blue Fantasy mock draft. That's what
we'll put some stuff together. We've got plenty of time during the offseason, so we got dynasty pieces we'll work on.
Blue Fantasy mock draft.
We've got a mock draft we can put together as well. We'll kind of probably update those throughout the offseason as well.
And hey, we're going to need to do the Woo Fantasy
draft
NFL draft pick 'em again. Yeah. Who's won the last couple of years?
Who won the picks contest this year against the spread?
Who won the NFL draft pick 'em the last 2 years?
Anyway, plenty of content we've got coming around the pike. I think the next show that I want to put together though is going to be centered around free agency. I've got a list of the potential free agents, and I think we're going to kind of throw those out there and talk about them and kind of really start to hammer in and dig down into 2021 free agency.
Good idea,
and
B.
Get a lot of those topics out there prior to the NFL draft and things like that. So that's going to be up on the deck for next podcast. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, thanks to all the fans out there, Woo Nation. This was our best season to date, participation wise from listeners. You guys were on here each and every week. We answered the questions for you. Hopefully, we helped you to win titles.
Glad you could join us on Sundays. Hopefully this year, now that my daughter is going to be a
little bit older,
we can do maybe a Wednesday or Thursday podcast and get back into the 2 times a week. But thank you, everybody, for joining us on Sunday mornings right before. I know we had a lot of consistent listeners. Hopefully, we helped you toward a title. Drop a comment.
Pre-game Woo Fantasy was off the charts this year.
Drop a comment. Let us know how we helped you this year.
Yeah.
Maybe how we hurt you too. I don't know. I'm sure we gave some bad advice too, but I think for the most part we gave some good advice.
Yes, definitely. So lots to discuss. Lots
that's coming around the Woo Fantasy listeners.
There we go. So be on the lookout for all the upcoming content, whether it be podcasts here with Woo Fantasy, whether it be my pieces coming out for rotoballer.com. Go to rotoballer.com, of course, as you can see at the bottom of the podcast. Promo code Woo Fantasy gets you that extra discount on the best premium content in fantasy sports, not just fantasy football. You got baseball coming up. Basketball's going now. We've got hockey starting up tonight.
I just did my hockey draft today.
There you go. So
you know why I do a hockey draft? It's not
just so you know who the players are
and know who wins. Like I'm a New York Rangers fan. Obviously, we like the Preds just coming from Tennessee, but I just need to do it just because nobody reports these results. Otherwise, you don't see them. So
no,
I read some. Let's see, was it Fantasy Pros had an article out? Some like my last 4 draft picks were from that website. I'm sure Rotoballer puts out some good stuff, but I didn't see it immediately on a quick search anyway online.
So we've got it all covered. That's all there. So definitely check that out across the board on the website. Premium content is off the chain, so check that out. Promo code Woo Fantasy. But until next time, be on the lookout, guys. Appreciate you being on tonight, listening to the 2020 Wooie Awards. We will talk to you next time on another episode of
Woo Fantasy.